This video is about dividing decimals. We'll divide decimals two ways, using a standard algorithm and using a giant one. We'll start with using the giant one. Giant one is also called a unit multiplier. So for example, I might have a problem 2.5 divided by 0.25. I could also write that 2.5 divided by 0.25. Both of these are equivalent expressions, but because I want to use a unit multiplier to make it a simpler problem, I'm setting it up as a fraction, in fraction form. Let me write that again. 2.5 divided by 0.25. To make this an easier problem, I want to remove all the decimal points and just have whole numbers. To do that, I'm going to multiply by what we call a giant one. And I see that I've used one decimal place here and two places here. I want to remove this decimal point, so I look at the number that has more decimal places, this one, and I'm going to multiply by the power of 10. That will clear the decimal point out. So if I multiply by 10, there's going to be a decimal point right here. But if I multiply this by 100, I'll have 25. So if I multiply this by 100, I have to also multiply this one by 100. Because I'm multiplying basically by 1 to rename the fraction. So 2.5 times 100 would be 250. 25 times 100 would be 25. Now at this point, I can factor out. 25 is the same as 25 times 1. So I have, and this 250 is the same as 25 times 10. So I have 25 over 25, that's a giant one. That leaves me 10 over 1, or 10, and that's my answer. I could also do this with the standard algorithm. I would have 2.5 divided by 0.25. Now, when I have decimal numbers with the standard algorithm, what I do is I see how many places do I have to move my decimal point in this one to make this a whole number. I see I need to move it 2 places. So I'm going to do the same thing with this value. So this is 1 place. I need to add a 0 to hold the place. I move it 1 place more, right here. So now I have 25 goes into 250. How many times? So I'll start here. 25 goes into 25 here once. I subtract that. I have 0. But my decimal point's here, so I know I'm going to put my decimal point here. I ask myself, how many times does 25 go into 0? Well, it doesn't go in, so I hold that place with a 0, and that's where my 10 comes from. And I have 0, so I've terminated. This is a terminating decimal number. Use another example. Let's say, I don't know. Negative 1.12 divided by 0.7. The first thing to note is that this is a signed number. So I'm multiplying or dividing, which means I'm going to count the number of negative signs that I have. I have 1. This is an odd number of negative signs, so I know that my answer will be a negative number. I put that negative there just to remind myself. Once I've done that, I know my answer is negative. I ignore this. I don't need to think about it anymore. So I'm going to set this up now as a fraction. So I have 1.12 divided by 0.7. I'm going to multiply it by a giant 1. And I see that I have 2 places here that I've used and 1 place here. So I'm going to multiply it by 100. And that's going to give me 112 divided by 70. So I see that, well, I can just go through and use my standard algorithm. So I have 112 divided by 70. 70 goes into this amount once. '70 won't divide evenly into 42, so I'm going to add a 0, make that 420. And I see that 70 will go into 420, I believe, 6 times. So I put my decimal point right there, I keep it lined up. 6 times 0 is 0, 6 times 7 is 42. And that gives me 0, so it terminates. So my answer is negative 1.6. Now if I were to do it with a standard algorithm, I would have, again, I know my answer is a negative, so put my negative right there. Now I don't have to worry about it anymore. So I have 1.12, or 1 and 1200ths, divided by 7/10. So I move my decimal point one place because I want this one to be cleared and be a whole number, and then in that case I move this one one place. My new decimal point will be right here. So I ask myself, how many times does 7 go into 11? Once. Minus 7. 11 minus 7 is 4. Bring down my 2. 7 goes into 42 6 times. And notice I get the same answer. So I hope this was helpful with dividing with decimals.